The space station floated in the darkness like a silver coin spinning in an endless ocean. Inside, something was very wrong. Commander Thella stood outside the containment room, her forearms crossed tightly across her chest. Through the transparent wall, she could see them, 5 small creatures huddled in the far corner. They looked like shadows given physical form, their dark fur absorbing the light around them. Their eyes glowed yellow in the dim room, wide with fear. "How long has it been?" Thalos asked. 3 days, replied her assistant, a thin creature named Valor with skin like polished stone. "They haven't eaten anything. They won't let anyone near them." Thalos sighed deeply. The Valorian shadow cubs were the last of their kind. Their home planet had died when its sun collapsed, and these 5 babies were all that remained of a species that once ruled 17 star systems. Every government in the galaxy wanted them safe. But safe meant alive, and alive meant eating. "Show me the recordings again," Thalos said. Valor pressed a button, and a screen lit up on the wall. The video showed a keeper entering the room with food. The cubs immediately began screaming, a sound that made Thalos' skin crawl even now. It wasn't like any animal cry she had ever heard. It was pure terror mixed with rage, a sound that promised violence if anyone came closer. In the video, the largest cub stepped forward, its lips pulled back to show teeth that could tear through metal. The keeper dropped the food and ran. The cubs didn't touch it. They just pressed closer together, shaking. "We've tried everything," Valor said quietly. "Different keepers, different foods, different times of day. Same result every time. What about the robot feeders? They attacked those too. Rip them apart." Thalos felt a weight settle in her chest. She had spent 20 years running this wildlife station. She had handled creatures from 1,000 worlds, some gentle as clouds, others deadly as supernovas. But she had never seen anything like this. These cubs were terrified of everything and everyone. "The human is here," Valor said suddenly. Thalos turned. "What human?" "The relief team arrived an hour ago. There's a human xenobiologist with them. Dr. Hyan, I think his name is." Thalos had heard of humans. Everyone had, after they joined the Galactic Council 5 years ago. They were strange creatures from a small blue planet, newcomers to the stars. They looked fragile with their soft skin and small teeth, but Thalos had read the reports. Humans came from a world that tried very hard to kill them, and somehow they had survived. More than survived, they had conquered their whole planet before reaching for the stars. "Send him to my office," Thalos said. Dr. Hyan was younger than Thalos expected. He had black hair and dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore the simple blue uniform of the Galactic Wildlife Service, and he smiled when he entered her office. "Commander Thalos," he said, bowing slightly. "Thank you for having me here." His voice was calm and warm. Thalos liked him immediately, though she wasn't sure why. "I wish it were under better circumstances," she replied. "I assume you've been briefed about the cubs?" "Yes, ma'am. 5 Valorian shadow cubs, approximately 4 months old, last survivors of their species. Currently refusing all food and contact." Jan's smile faded. "They must be so scared." Something about the way he said it made Thalos pause. Not dangerous or difficult, scared. As if these apex predators, these creatures that could grow large enough to hunt ships in space, were just frightened children. "They've injured 3 of my best handlers," Thalos said carefully. "We can't even get close enough to check their health. If something doesn't change soon—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Jan nodded slowly. "May I see them?" "You can observe through the wall, but I can't let you enter. It's too dangerous." "I understand." Thalos led him through the winding corridors of the station. Other staff members stopped to stare at the human. Humans were still rare in this part of the galaxy, and Jan drew attention everywhere he went. He didn't seem to notice. His eyes were focused ahead, his expression thoughtful. They reached the observation room. Through the wall, the cubs were visible, still huddled in their corner. One of them was lying down now, its breathing shallow. "That's Baram," Valor whispered, pointing at the largest cub. "He's been protecting the others. And that tiny one is Hanul. She hasn't moved in hours." Jan pressed his hand against the transparent wall. His eyes were sad as he watched the cubs. "They're dying," he said softly. "I know," Thalos replied. "But we can't help them if they won't let us near. May I try?" Thalos turned to look at him.
"Try what?"
"Going inside. Talking to them. Absolutely not. They'll kill you." Hyun kept his eyes on the cubs. Maybe, but right now they're dying anyway. At least this way there's a chance. I can't authorize that. If something happened to you, the human government would— I'll sign whatever papers you need, Hyun interrupted gently. This is my choice. I'm a xenobiologist, Commander. I've spent my whole life studying creatures from other worlds. Let me do my job. Thalos looked at Velor, who seemed just as uncertain as she felt. Then she looked back at the cubs. The small one, Hunil, was barely breathing now. Fine, she said finally, but you wear protective gear. And if they charge you, you get out immediately. No protective gear, Hyun said. It will scare them more. And I promise if they want me to leave, I'll leave. Before Thalos could argue, Hyun walked to the door of the containment room. Velor rushed to open it, his hands shaking as he entered the access code. This is insane, Thalos muttered. The door slid open. Hyun stepped inside. The change was immediate. The cub's head snapped up, their glowing eyes fixed on the human. Thalos's hand moved to the emergency button, ready to flood the room with sleeping gas if needed. But the cubs didn't scream. They didn't charge. They just stared. Hyun stood very still just inside the door. He didn't move toward them. He didn't speak. He just waited. Seconds passed. Then minutes. Thalos held her breath slowly, impossibly. Bahram stood up. The large cub took one careful step forward. Then another. His nose twitched, smelling the air. His eyes never left Hyun's face. What's happening? Velor whispered. Thalos couldn't answer. She had no idea. Bahram walked all the way across the room until he stood directly in front of Hyun. The human and the cub looked at each other. Then, moving so slowly that Thalos almost didn't see it happen, Hyun lowered himself to his knees. He was now at eye level with the cub. Bahram tilted his head. And then he did something that made Thalos gasp. He walked forward and pressed his head against Hyun's chest. The human's hand came up slowly, gently, and touched the cub's dark fur. And from somewhere deep in Bahram's chest came a sound that no one on the station had ever heard before. He was purring. One by one, the other cubs approached. They surrounded Hyun, pressing close to him, making that same rumbling purr. Even little Hanul dragged herself across the floor to curl up against his leg. Hyun looked up at the observation window. There were tears in his eyes, but he was smiling. Thalos stood frozen, her mind trying to process what she was seeing. In 20 years, she had never witnessed anything like this. Creatures that attacked everyone else were treating this human like family. How? Velor whispered. How is this possible? Thalos shook her head slowly. She had no answer. But as she watched Hyun sit there on the floor, surrounded by purring shadows, she knew one thing for certain. Everything they thought they knew about humans was wrong. The news spread through the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within 2 days, the space station was flooded with messages. Scientists from every corner of known space wanted to study what happened. The Galactic News Network played the footage on repeat. Dr. Hyun sitting calmly on the floor while 5 deadly predators cuddled around him like puppies. Commander, Thalos had to hire extra security just to handle all the people trying to visit. Another request from the Corvian Science Academy, Velor said, reading from his datapad. They want to send a team of 12 researchers. Tell them the same thing we told everyone else, Thalos replied tiredly. They can send 2 people and they have to follow all station protocols. She rubbed her temples with 2 of her 4 hands. She hadn't slept properly in days. Through the window of her office, she could see the observation room. A crowd of scientists stood there watching Hyun with the cubs. The human spent almost every hour with them now. He fed them by hand, talking to them in his soft voice. The cubs followed him everywhere, even sleeping in a pile around him at night. When other people tried to enter the room, the cubs would growl and hide behind Hyun until he calmed them down. It made no sense. Dr. Mirai arrived on the 3rd day. She was human too, a psychiatrist specializing in species behavior. She had short hair and carried herself with quiet confidence. When Thalos met her at the docking bay, Mirai bowed in the same way Hyun had. Thank you for allowing me to come. Commander, Mirai said. I hope you can help us understand what's happening, Thalos replied. Because right now we have no explanations. They walked together to the observation room. Hyun was inside with the cubs, tossing a soft ball across the floor. Bahram chased it and brought it back, his tail wagging. The sight of a Valorian shadow cub playing made several scientists gasp. How long has Dr. Hyon been working with them? Mirai asked. Every day since he arrived. He only leaves when he needs to sleep or eat. And the cubs, how is their health? Much better. They're eating regularly now, growing stronger. But only when Hyon is present. Mirai nodded slowly, her eyes studying everything. Has anyone tested his biochemistry? Checked for unusual pheromones or chemical signals? Yes, 3 different teams. They found nothing unusual. Hyon is completely normal for a human. Interesting. Over the next week, Mirai ran more tests. She studied Hyun's heart rate when he was with the cubs. She analyzed his voice patterns, his movements, even the way he breathed. Other scientists joined her, bringing equipment that filled entire rooms. They measured everything they could think of, and they found nothing. It doesn't make scientific sense, said Dr. Kelmar, a renowned xenobiologist with 8 eyes and a brain twice the size of a human's. There's no biological mechanism that explains this bond. They were all gathered in the conference room. Thelis, Mirai, Kelmar, and 5 other leading scientists. On the screen, video footage showed Hyon teaching the cubs to respond to simple commands. When he said sit in his language, they sat. When he held up his hand, they stopped moving. What if it's not biological? Mirai said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Explain, Kelmar demanded. Mirai stood up and walked to the screen. She changed the video to show Earth, the human homeworld. Green and blue covered in clouds, it looked peaceful from space. But the video zoomed in to show cities and forests, oceans and mountains. Humans evolved on a death world, Mirai began. Our planet tried to kill us in every way possible. Predators, diseases, weather, other humans. We spent millions of years learning to survive. Many species evolved in harsh conditions, Kelmar interrupted. That's not unique. True, but humans did something unusual. We didn't just survive, we became predators ourselves. Persistence hunters. We would chase prey for days until they collapsed from exhaustion. We learned to use tools, fire, weapons. We went from being hunted to being the most dangerous hunters on our planet. The room was quiet. Everyone knew this already. Human history was well documented. But here's what makes us different, Mirai continued. We also domesticated other predators. Wolves became dogs. We took wild, dangerous animals and made them family. We learned to read their emotions, to communicate across species barriers. It's coded into us now, this ability to bond with creatures that should be our enemies. You're suggesting the cubs recognize humans as fellow predators? Asked Thelis. More than that. I think they recognize us as safe predators, ones who protect instead of harm. Mirai paused. Think about it. These cubs lost everything. Their world, their families, their entire species. They're alone and terrified. Then a human walks in, a creature from another death world, another species that knows what survival costs. Maybe they sense something familiar in us. That's very poetic, Kelmar said dryly, but it's not science. Then explain why it works, Mirai challenged. Explain why every test shows nothing unusual, yet the bond clearly exists. No one had an answer. That afternoon, they decided to try an experiment. They brought in Ji-won, a young keeper who had been working at the station for 2 years. She was brave and good with animals. She volunteered to enter the cubs' room while Hyon watched from outside. Just walk in slowly, Hyon instructed through the communication system. Keep your hands where they can see them. Don't make sudden movements, Ji-won nodded nervously. She opened the door and stepped inside. The cubs' reaction was immediate. They stopped playing and turned to look at her. Baram moved in front of the others, his body tense. A low growl rumbled in his chest. It's okay, Ji-won said softly, copying the tone Hyon used. I'm not going to hurt you. She took another step forward. The growling grew louder. Haniol, the smallest cub, ran to hide behind Baram. Try sitting down, Hyon suggested. Make yourself less threatening. Ji-won slowly lowered herself to the floor, just as Hyon always did. She sat cross-legged and waited. The cubs didn't approach. They just watched her, their yellow eyes unblinking. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Ji-won remained still, patient. But the cubs didn't move closer. If anything, they seemed more nervous. Come out, Hyon finally said. It's not working. Ji-won stood up carefully and left the room. The moment the door closed, the cubs relaxed. They ran to the observation window where Hyon stood and pressed their noses against the glass. Whimpering. Hyon went back inside and they mobbed him immediately. Clearly relieved to have him back. Why didn't it work? Thelis asked. Ji-won did everything exactly the same way. I don't know, Mireille admitted. She looked troubled. They tried again the next day with a different keeper. Same result. Then they tried with a scientist. Then with a member of the security team. Each time, the cubs refused to approach anyone who wasn't Hyun. What if we brought in another human? Suggested Velour. Mireille's eyes lit up. Yes, let's try that. It took 3 days to arrange, but finally another human arrived at the station. His name was Taemin, a cargo ship captain who happened to be passing through the system. He was older than Hyun, with gray in his hair and scars on his hands from years of hard work. I don't know anything about animals, Taemin admitted, but I'm happy to help if I can. They explained what they needed. Taemin listened carefully, then nodded. I'll do my best, he said. Hyun stepped out of the cubs' room. The cubs whined and paced, upset by his absence. Then Taemin opened the door and walked in. The scientists held their breath. The cubs stopped pacing. They turned to look at Taemin. Barham tilted his head, studying this new human. Then slowly he walked forward. Taemin stood very still, letting the cub approach. Barham sniffed his hand, his leg, his boots. The cub's tail began to wag slightly. Within minutes, all 5 cubs were investigating Taemin. They didn't cuddle with him the way they did with Hyun, but they weren't afraid either. When Taemin sat down, Hanul carefully climbed into his lap. The old captain's eyes went wide with wonder. He touched the cub's soft fur with gentle hands. Hello, little one, he whispered. In the observation room, every scientist was talking at once. It's not just Hyun, Kelmar said, amazement in his voice. It's all humans, but why? Thelis demanded. What do humans have that we don't? Mireille was smiling now, tears in her eyes. I think I know, she said. And if I'm right, it changes everything we thought we knew about your species. She pulled up data on her screen, human brain scans, genetic markers, behavioral studies. Humans have unusually active mirror neurons, she explained. Parts of our brain that let us feel what others feel. When we see someone in pain, we feel pain. When we see fear, we feel fear. It works across species. We can empathize with creatures nothing like us. Other species have empathy, Kelmar protested. Not like this. Not this deep. Mireille pulled up comparison charts. Human children cry when they see animals suffering. Human adults risk their lives to save creatures they've never met. We can't help it, it's how we're built. And maybe somehow the cubs can sense that. They know we won't hurt them because we can't bear to see them hurt. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this. You're saying humans are universal caregivers? Thelis asked slowly. I'm saying we might be the galaxy's best chance at saving species like these cubs. Because we don't just study them or preserve them, we love them. Through the window, Taemin was laughing as the cubs played around him. Hyun had come back inside, and now both humans sat together while the cubs ran between them, happy and safe. 3 months passed like water flowing through cupped hands. The space station had changed. Where once there were only observation rooms and laboratories, now there were play areas and training grounds. Where once there was silence, now there was the sound of cubs playing, running, living. Hyun had changed too. He looked older somehow, though he smiled more often. The cubs had grown bigger, stronger. Barham now stood as tall as Hyun's waist, his shoulders broad and powerful. Even little Hanul had doubled in size, though she still liked to sleep curled against Hyun's side at night. Dr. Mireille had stayed at the station, continuing her research. She had been joined by dozens of other scientists, all trying to understand the bond between humans and the cubs. But the more they studied, the less scientific it seemed. Look at this, Mireille said one evening, showing Hyun her data. They sat in her small office while the cubs slept in the next room. Your brain activity when you're with them is unlike anything we've seen before. Hyun studied the colorful scans. What does it mean? It means your brain treats them the same way it treats human family members. The same chemicals, the same neural pathways. As far as your mind is concerned, those cubs are your children. Hyun looked through the window at the sleeping cubs. That's how it feels, he admitted. I can't explain it any other way. And that's the mystery we can't solve, Mireille said, frustration in her voice. We can measure it, observe it, document it. But we can't explain why humans have this ability and other species don't. Maybe it doesn't need an explanation, Hyun said softly. Maybe some things just are. Mireille smiled sadly. The council wants answers. They're debating the sanctuary program and they need scientific proof that it will work. What does the proof matter? They've seen it work, politics, Mireille sighed. Some council members are afraid of giving humans too much influence. They worry about what it means if one species can control creatures that others can't. Before Hyun could respond, Jiwon burst into the office. Her eyes were shining with excitement. "Turn on the news," she said breathlessly. "Channel 47. You need to see this." Mirai activated the screen. The Galactic News Network appeared, showing their main anchor, a dignified creature with silver scales and wise eyes. "Unprecedented testimony before the Galactic Council today," the anchor was saying. Dr. Hyun of Earth, the human who first bonded with the Valorian Shadow Cubs, spoke about the proposed sanctuary program. "We have footage from the session." The screen changed to show the council chamber, a vast circular room where representatives from hundreds of species gathered, and there, standing at the center, was Hyun. "Wait," Hyun said, confused. "When did I— This morning?" Jiwon interrupted. "You were in the council meeting for 4 hours. Don't you remember?" "I remember, but I didn't think they'd broadcast it." On screen, the Hyun from this morning stood calmly before the council. The cub sat beside him, perfectly behaved. As the footage played, present-day Hyun remembered every word. "Honorable council members," his image said, "I'm not a politician or a diplomat. I'm just someone who cares about creatures who can't speak for themselves. These cubs were dying when I met them. Not from disease or injury, but from fear. They were so afraid of everyone and everything that they chose death over contact." The council chamber was silent, listening. "I didn't have any special training when I walked into their room. I didn't have scientific equipment or medications. All I had was the willingness to sit with them in their fear. To be present. To care." On screen, Baram leaned against Hyun's leg. The gesture was casual, unconscious, the way a child might lean on a parent. "People ask me why the cubs trust humans," Hyun continued. "I've heard all the theories. Our brain chemistry, our evolutionary history, our mirror neurons. And maybe those things are all true, but I think the real answer is simpler." He paused, looking around the chamber at all the different species watching him. "We know what it's like to be afraid. Every human alive comes from ancestors who were hunted, who starved, who fought to survive. We carry that memory in us, and when we see other creatures suffering, we recognize that fear because we've felt it ourselves. We can't help but care. It's built into who we are." A council member stood, a tall being made of living crystal. "But why should that make humans suitable to run these sanctuaries? Other species also have difficult histories." "Because humans don't just survive," Hyun replied. "We adopt. We bring in outsiders and make them family. On Earth, we domesticated wolves and made them our companions. We tamed cats, horses, birds. We formed bonds with creatures that had no reason to trust us. And we didn't do it for labor or food, we did it because we were lonely, and they were lonely, and together we were stronger." Another council member spoke, this one resembling an octopus, but with wings. "You're asking us to trust humanity with some of the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy." "No," Hyun said firmly. "I'm asking you to trust these creatures with humanity, because they're not dangerous when they feel safe. Baram could tear through starship hulls, but he chooses to play fetch instead. Hanil could kill with a single bite, but she chooses to sleep curled up like a house cat. They're only dangerous when they're afraid." The chamber was absolutely quiet now. "Give us a chance," Hyun pleaded. "Let humans build sanctuaries for species like these cubs, not to control them or study them, but to give them homes, to give them families, to let them know they're safe." The footage ended. The news anchor returned, but Hyun wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at the blank screen, reliving the moment. "That was beautiful," Mirai said quietly. "I was terrified," Hyun admitted, standing there in front of the whole council with billions watching. "I thought I would freeze up." "But you didn't," Jiwon said. "You spoke from your heart and everyone heard it." The communicator on Mirai's desk buzzed. "It was Commander Thelis. Conference room now, all of you." They rushed through the corridors, the cubs padding along beside them. Other staff members were hurrying in the same direction, all looking excited or nervous or both. The conference room was packed. Every scientist, every keeper, every person on the station had crowded inside. Commander Thelis stood at the front, her forearms spread wide for attention. "The council has made their decision," she announced. The room went silent. Hyun held his breath. "The sanctuary program is approved," Thelis said, and the room erupted in cheers. "Humanity will establish protected habitats for endangered predatory species across the galaxy. The program starts immediately." People were hugging, laughing, crying. Hyun felt Jiwon grab his hand and squeeze tight. Mireille was wiping tears from her eyes. "There's more," Thelis said, raising her voice over the celebration. "Dr. Hyan has been appointed director of the first sanctuary, and the council has allocated funding for 50 more sanctuaries to be built over the next 5 years." More cheers. Someone started clapping, and soon everyone joined in. Hyan felt his face burn with embarrassment and pride. That night, after the celebrations ended, Hyan sat alone with the cubs in their room. He was tired down to his bones but happy. Tomorrow would bring new responsibilities, new challenges. But tonight he just wanted to be with them. "We did it," he told the cubs softly. "We're going to help so many creatures, so many families." Barham looked up at him with those intelligent yellow eyes. The cub made a soft chirping sound. Something new, something Jan had never heard before. "What is it, boy?" Barham walked to the corner of the room and picked up a small data pad in his mouth. He brought it back and dropped it at Hyun's feet. Confused, Hyun picked it up. The screen showed a music file. He pressed play. A song filled the room. It was an old Korean lullaby, one his grandmother had sung to him when he was small. He had listened to it sometimes when he felt homesick, when space felt too big and Earth too far away. "How did you—" Hyun started, then stopped. Barham must have watched him play it before, must have learned to access it. The cub settled down beside him, resting his large head on Hyun's lap. One by one, the other cubs came closer, drawn by the music. Hyun began to sing along softly in Korean. His voice wasn't good, never had been, but the cubs didn't care. They shifted their bodies, their breathing, until they matched the rhythm of the song. It was such a small thing, this moment. Just a man singing to creatures from another world. But as Hyun sang, he understood something he hadn't before. "You're lonely too, aren't you?" he whispered between verses. "You lost everything, just like I feared I might. Your world, your family, your whole species, and you're scared that you'll always be alone." Hanul made a small whimpering sound. "But you're not alone," Hyun continued, stroking her soft fur. "You have each other. And you have me. And soon you'll have more humans who will care for you, protect you, love you." He thought about his grandmother who had sung these same songs to him. She had died before he left Earth, before he saw the stars. But she had taught him something important. That family wasn't just about blood. It was about choosing to care, choosing to stay, choosing to love even when it was hard. "I choose you," Hyun told the cubs. "All of you. Forever." Barham's purr started deep in his chest and spread to the others. Soon all 5 cubs were purring together. A sound like distant thunder, like the engine of a ship, like home. "We need to tell the Galactic Council," Thelis said finally. "Tell them what?" asked Vel. The alarm screamed through the station at 3 in the morning. Hyun jerked awake, his heart pounding. Around him, the cubs lifted their heads, confused and frightened by the noise. Red emergency lights flooded the room, painting everything in shades of blood. "All personnel, this is Commander Thelis." Her voice came through the speakers, tight with stress. "We have hostile ships approaching. This is not a drill. Security teams to your stations. Everyone else proceed to safe rooms immediately." Hyun's hand shook as he pulled on his boots. The cubs pressed close to him, whimpering. They could sense his fear, and it made them afraid too. "It's okay," he told them, though his voice trembled. "We're going to be okay." Through the wall, he could see people running through the corridors. Scientists, keepers, engineers, all rushing to safety. The station shuddered as something impacted the outer hull. "They're firing on us," Hyun whispered. His communicator buzzed. It was Jiwon, the young keeper who had tried to befriend the cubs. "Dr. Hyan, where are you?" Her voice was high with panic. "Still with the cubs." "What's happening?" "Pirates. 3 ships. They're cutting through the hull." A pause, then. "They want the cubs, Hyun. They're here for the cubs." Ice flooded Hyun's veins. He looked at the 5 creatures huddled around him. Barham's fur was standing on end, his teeth bared. The others were shaking. "I won't let them take you," Hyun promised. "I won't." Another impact rocked the station. Closer this time. Hyun could hear shouting in the corridors now, and the sharp crack of energy weapons. His communicator buzzed again. Commander Thelis this time. "Hyun, get to emergency passage 7 now. I'm sending a security team to escort you and the cubs to the evacuation pods." "Understood." He stood up, and the cubs scrambled to their feet with him. "Come on," he said, moving toward the door. "Stay close to me." They followed him out into the corridor. The emergency lighting made everything look strange and nightmarish. An explosion somewhere above them sent debris raining down. Hanul yelped and pressed against Hyun's leg. "This way," he said, running now. The cubs ran with him, staying in formation around him. It reminded Hyun of wolves protecting their pack, and despite his terror, he felt a surge of love for these brave creatures. They turned a corner and nearly collided with Jiwon. She had a small energy pistol in her hand and a wild look in her eyes. "The security team can't get through," she panted. "The pirates have blocked off that whole section. We have to go around. Which way?" "Follow me." They ran through the twisting corridors of the station. Behind them, Hyun could hear more explosions, more shouting. The pirates were cutting through the station's defenses like paper. "Why aren't the defense systems working?" Hyun gasped. "They disabled them somehow. Thalos thinks they had inside information." Jiwon skidded to a halt at an intersection. "This way leads to the emergency passages, but—" She never finished the sentence. 5 figures in armored suits stepped out from the side corridor, blocking their path. Pirates. Their suits were covered in weapons, and their helmets hid their faces behind dark visors. Well, said one of them, his voice distorted by the helmet. The famous human and his little pets. The cubs erupted in snarls and roars. The sound in the enclosed corridor was deafening. The pirates actually took a step back. "Easy there," the pirate leader said, raising his weapon. "We don't want to hurt anyone. Just give us the cubs and we'll be on our way." "They're not pets," Hyun said, forcing his voice to stay steady. "And you can't have them." The pirate laughed. "You think you have a choice? There are 5 of us and 2 of you. Well, 2 and whatever those things are." Barum stepped forward, placing himself between Hyun and the pirates. The large cub's lips pulled back, showing teeth that could tear through metal. A deep growl rumbled from his chest. "Those things are Valorian shadow cubs," Jiwon said. "Do you know what that means? Do you know what they can do?" "Yeah, we know," another pirate said. "That's why they're worth so much. Flood sport arenas will pay millions for predators like these." Hyun felt sick. Blood sport, forcing creatures to fight for entertainment. "These cubs would be tortured, starved, driven to madness." "No," he said firmly. "You're not taking them," the pirate leader sighed. "Then I guess we'll have to do this the hard way." He raised his weapon. Time seemed to slow down. Hyun saw the pirate's finger move toward the trigger. He saw Barum tense, ready to leap. He saw Jiwon start to raise her own small pistol. And then Hyun did something he didn't plan. Something that came from pure instinct. He stepped forward, putting himself between the cubs and the weapons. "If you want them," he said quietly, "you'll have to go through me first." The pirates hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, Hyun kept talking. "Do you know why the cubs trust me?" he asked. "Do you know why they don't trust you?" "Don't care," the leader said. But he didn't fire. "They trust me because they know I'll protect them. They know I'd rather die than let anyone hurt them." Hyun's voice grew stronger. "That's what humans do. We protect those who can't protect themselves. It's who we are." "Touching speech," the pirate said. "But we have contracts to fulfill. Those cubs are worth—" He never finished. Barum launched himself forward so fast that Hyun barely saw him move. The large cub slammed into the pirate leader, knocking him down. But before Barum could bite, Hyun shouted a single word: "Stop." Barum froze, his teeth an inch from the pirate's throat. The other cubs had moved too, surrounding the remaining pirates. But they all stopped at Hyun's command, waiting. The pirates stared in shock at the creatures holding perfectly still, controlled by nothing but a human's voice. "Here's what's going to happen," Hyun said, his voice calm now. "You're going to put down your weapons and back away slowly. If you make any threatening moves, I will let the cubs do what they want to do, and trust me, you don't want that." "You're bluffing," one pirate said, but his voice shook. "Am I?" Hyun looked at Barum. The cub's muscles were coiled springs, ready to explode into violence. "Barum wants to protect his family. Right now, I'm the only thing stopping him. Do you really want to test whether I'm bluffing?" The standoff lasted for what felt like hours. Then slowly, the pirate leader dropped his weapon. "Smart choice," Jiwon said, quickly grabbing the fallen guns. The other pirates followed their leader's example. They backed away, hands raised. "This isn't over," the leader growled. "There are more of us on this station. And there are security teams hunting them down right now," Hyun replied. "You lost the moment you attacked a galactic wildlife station. An explosion nearby made everyone jump. The station shook hard enough to throw people off their feet." Hyun grabbed onto the wall and the cubs clustered around him protectively. "We need to move," Jiwon said. "Now!" They ran, leaving the disarmed pirates behind. The emergency passage was just ahead. But as they approached, another section of wall exploded inward. More pirates poured through the breach. "There they are," someone shouted. Energy bolts flashed through the air. Ji-won returned fire, but she was outnumbered. The cubs snarled and tried to charge, but the corridor was too narrow, too chaotic. "Get down!" Ji-won screamed. Hyun dropped to the floor, shielding Hanul with his body. Around him, the world exploded into noise and light, and then suddenly it stopped. Hyun looked up. Commander Thelis stood at the other end of the corridor with a full security team. The pirates were on the ground, stunned by some kind of sonic weapon. "Are you hurt?" Thelis demanded, rushing to Hyun. "No, we're okay. The cubs are okay." Thelis looked at the cubs, then at the unconscious pirates, then back at Hyun. "You held them off? Just you and Ji-won?" "The cubs helped," Hyun said, standing up on shaky legs. "They wanted to fight, but I made them stop. You made them stop." Thelis shook her head in disbelief. "During an attack, you controlled 5 predatory cubs with just your voice." "They trust me," Hyun said simply. More security teams arrived. They secured the pirates and began repairing the breach. Slowly, the chaos settled into organized response. Within an hour, all the pirates were captured, and their ships were disabled. Commander Thelis gathered everyone in the main conference room. Scientists, security personnel, and staff members filled every seat. On the screens, footage played from the attack, and specifically footage of Hyun standing between the cubs and armed pirates. "This is being broadcast across every news network in the galaxy," Thelis said. "Everyone is watching." Hyun felt his face burn. He hadn't meant to become famous. He just wanted to protect his friends. "The Galactic Council has been in emergency session for the past hour," Thelis continued. "They've seen what humans can do with species that others can't even approach. They've seen how the cubs trust you, protect you, obey you." "What does that mean?" asked Mirai, who had stayed safe in a shelter during the attack. Thelis smiled. It was the first time Hyun had seen her smile. "It means," she said, "that the Council wants to discuss a new program, a sanctuary initiative, led by humans." The room erupted in excited chatter. Hyun just stood there, trying to process everything. Around his feet, the cubs pressed close, still nervous from the attack, but safe. Safe because he had protected them. Ji-won touched his arm gently. "You know what this means, right?" "What?" "It means you just changed the galaxy." Hyun looked down at the cubs. "At Barum, brave and stir." Days turned into weeks. More humans arrived at the station, volunteers who wanted to work with endangered species. Hyun trained them, teaching them what he had 20 years later. The galaxy was different. Dr. Hyun stood on the observation deck of the sanctuary station, his hair now streaked with gray. His face had more lines than it used to, evidence of decades spent under alien suns and artificial lights. But his eyes were the same, warm, kind, observant. Below him stretched the sanctuary world. It had once been a barren moon, lifeless rock circling a gas giant. Now it bloomed with constructed habitats, forests under domes, oceans in vast tanks, mountains that touched artificial skies. And everywhere, creatures from 100 worlds lived in safety. Beautiful, isn't it? Hyun turned to see Commander Thelis approaching. She was older too, moving slower than she once had. But she still commanded respect from everyone on the station. "I never imagined it would become this," Hyun admitted. "When we started with just 5 cubs, those 5 changed everything," Thelis said. She joined him at the window. "Did you see the news this morning?" "I try not to watch the news. It's always about politics," Thelis laughed. "This time it's good politics." The council approved funding for 20 more sanctuary worlds. "That brings the total to 73. Hyun shook his head in wonder. 73 worlds dedicated to protecting creatures that had nowhere else to go. Staffed by thousands of humans and aliens working together, home to species that would have gone extinct without intervention. And it all started because a human refused to let some cubs die afraid," Thelis added quietly. A commotion near the entrance made them both turn. Ji-won was rushing toward them, no longer young but still energetic. She had become Hyun's second in command, managing the daily operations of the sanctuary. "Hyun, you need to come quick," she said, slightly out of breath. "It's Baram." Hyun's heart clenched. "Is he okay?" "Yes, but just come see." They hurried through the station's corridors. Over the years, the facility had expanded into a small city floating in space. Medical wings, research labs, training centers, living quarters for hundreds of staff members. And at the heart of it all, the original habitat where 5 terrified cubs had first learned to trust. Hyun entered the habitat to find a crowd gathered. Scientists, keepers, visiting diplomats all standing at a respectful distance watching something in the center of the room. Barham lay in a shaft of sunlight, massive and magnificent. He had grown into his full size over the years, large enough to ride on like a horse. His fur was still shadow dark, but now it had streaks of silver around his muzzle. He was old for his species, though still strong. And curled against his side were 3 tiny cubs. Hyun's breath caught in his throat. "When did this happen?" he whispered. "Last night," Ji-won said, her voice thick with emotion. "Hanul gave birth. 3 healthy cubs, the first Valorian shadow cubs born in captivity in over a century." Tears blurred Hyun's vision. He watched as Hanul, now fully grown herself, carefully groomed her babies. They were so small, no bigger than earth kittens, their eyes still closed. "The species isn't extinct anymore," someone said behind him. Dr. Mirai, also older now, her hair completely white. She had become the galaxy's leading expert on cross-species bonding, but she still returned to this station often. "No," Hyun agreed. "They're not." He walked slowly toward the family group. Barham's eyes opened and the big cub, no, the adult now, lifted his head. His tail wagged once, twice. "Hey, old friend," Hyun said softly, kneeling beside him. "You're an uncle now." Barham made a deep rumbling sound, almost like a laugh. Hanul looked up from her cubs and chirped at Hyun, that same sound she had made as a baby when she wanted attention. "Can I see them?" Hyun asked. Hanul carefully picked up one of the cubs in her mouth and brought it to Hyun. He cradled the tiny creature in his hands, feeling its warmth, its rapid heartbeat. The cub made a small mewling sound. "Hello, little one," Hyun whispered. "Welcome to the world. You're going to love it here." Around the room, people were crying openly. This wasn't just about 3 new cubs. This was proof that everything they had worked for was real, was possible, was worth it. "What will you name them?" asked Somin. She had stayed with the program all these years, now running her own sanctuary station. Hyun looked at the 3 cubs, 2 that looked like shadows, and one that had unusual pale gray fur. "The dark ones can be Buell and Haru," he said. "Star and Day. And this little gray one." He held up the pale cub. "This one is Huimang, Hope." The name felt right. These cubs were hope itself, hope that even species on the edge of extinction could return, could thrive, could have futures. Over the following weeks, the galaxy celebrated. The birth of the Valorian cubs was broadcast on every news network. Children on 100 worlds drew pictures of the cubs. Scientists published papers about what this meant for conservation efforts. But for Hyun, the most important moments were quiet ones, sitting with the cubs in the early morning, watching them stumble around on unsteady legs, teaching them to play with soft toys, singing them the same lullabies he had sung to their parents decades ago. One evening, he found Daehyun in the observation room. The old soldier was watching the cubs through the window, a soft expression on his weathered face. "I never thought I'd live to see this," Daehyun said. "When I came here 20 years ago, I was just looking for a place to belong. And now you've helped save a species," Hyun finished. "We all did, but it started with you." Daehyun turned to look at Hyun. "You taught us that being human means more than just being from Earth. It means choosing to care when caring is hard." Hyun didn't know what to say to that, so he just stood beside his friend and watched the cubs play. The Galactic Council requested Hyun's presence for a special ceremony. He didn't want to go, ceremonies made him uncomfortable, but Ji-won insisted. "They're giving you an award," she said. "You can't skip it. I don't need awards. I just want to work with the cubs. Too bad. You're going." So Hyun found himself once again standing in the council chamber, before representatives from across the galaxy. But this time he wasn't alone. Barham stood beside him, calm and dignified. The big cub had insisted on coming, and no one had the heart to say no. The council speaker, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline form, addressed the chamber. "Dr. Hyun of Earth," the speaker said, 20 years ago you walked into a room with 5 dying cubs. You had no weapons, no special technology, no guarantees of success. All you had was compassion, and that compassion sparked a revolution. Images appeared on the screens around the chamber. Sanctuary worlds teeming with life. Humans working alongside aliens of every description. Species once thought doomed, now thriving. Because of your example, thousands of humans joined the Sanctuary program. Because of your work, species numbering in the hundreds have been saved from extinction. Because of your courage, the galaxy learned something it had forgotten, that the strongest weapon is not force, but love. The chamber erupted in applause. Beings from 1,000 worlds stood to honor one human and one cub. The Galactic Council hereby awards you the Medal of Universal Service, the highest honor we can bestow. The speaker continued. But more than that, we offer our gratitude. You showed us what humanity truly is. Hion accepted the medal, though his hands shook slightly. Barum pressed against his leg, offering silent support. When the chamber quieted, Hion spoke. I'm honored, he said, but I didn't do this alone. Every human who works in the sanctuaries, every person who chose compassion over fear, they're the real heroes. And the creatures themselves who trusted us when they had no reason to trust, they're the bravest of all. He looked down at Barum. This cub was terrified of everyone when I met him. He had lost his world, his family, everything he knew, but he chose to trust me anyway. That took more courage than anything I've ever done. Barum's tail wagged. Humanity's gift to the galaxy isn't technology or military strength, Hion continued. It's the simple act of sitting with someone in their fear and saying, you're not alone. That's all we've ever done. And if that's made a difference, then I'm grateful. After the ceremony, Hion returned to the sanctuary station. He was tired, ready to retire to his quiet quarters. But when he arrived, he found a surprise waiting. The original 5 cubs, now adults, had gathered in the main habitat. With them were their cubs and grandcubs, a whole family spanning 3 generations. Dozens of Valorian shadow cubs filled the space, from tiny babies to massive adults, and they were all waiting for him. When Hion entered, every single cub began to purr. The sound was like thunder, like the heartbeat of the universe itself. It resonated through the floor, through the walls, through Hion's chest. What's all this? He asked, though his voice shook with emotion. G1 appeared beside him, smiling. They wanted to thank you, all of them, for everything. Hion walked into the middle of the group and the cubs surrounded him. Young ones climbed over his feet. Adults pressed their heads against his hands. Babies mewled from their mothers' sides. Barum approached last, moving with the careful dignity of an elder. He touched his nose to Hion's forehead, a gesture of deep respect among his kind. We're family, Hion said simply. That's all we've ever been. That night, long after everyone else had gone to bed, Hion sat in the habitat with Huimang, the little gray cub. She